All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Yufeng Gao, and I'm a core faculty in the School of Landscape Architecture at the Boston Architectural College. This evening's event is the second in the spring 2025 Just Future lecture series, supported in part by Eastern Savings Bank. Now, I would like to introduce Denise Rush, Dean of the School of Interior Architecture, to the podium virtually with us to introduce our speaker tonight, Kelly Harris-Smith. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am pleased to introduce Kelly Harris-Smith, who is a Boston-based designer, creative director, entrepreneur, and educator specializing in sustainable and natural materials for interior design. She's a graduate of Northeastern University in architecture. She is a co-founder of Phil's Felt, a company focused on innovative felt products that was later acquired by Knoll. Kelly has numerous accolades, including Product Designer Award, Interior Designs HIP Award, I believe most recently, the Interior Design Boy Award, Best of Year Award for a product called Spool for RBW. Um, Kelly is everywhere in design. I run into her quite a bit at design events and seeing her products that she's designed. And I also run into her quite a bit here in Boston because she also is the founder of Minni, a creative space for children in the South End in SoWa, as well as on Charles Street in Beacon Hill. And I can also proudly say that Kelly is a member of my Dean's Advisory Board for the School of Interior Architecture, where we gather to talk about the future of design and interiors. And so without further ado, I introduce Kelly and her lecture, Creative Impact, Designing a Just Future.
All right. Hi there. Thank you so much, Denise, wherever you are. I am really excited to be here to talk to everyone. Can you hear me? Good. So when I was invited to think about the theme and connect my own story to the theme Just Futures, I really thought about the role of design as a tool to encourage justice, particularly in terms of social, environmental, and economic impacts. But I'd really like to just share my story and kind of connect some of the work that I've done over the years and how it ties into these particular areas. So Diana, and Yufan, who asked me to do this lecture, initially asked, like, what is my title? And to be honest, I have a tough time answering that question. It's a little bit rambling. Sometimes I ask a friend to introduce me and see what they say. But this is, all right, it's not moving. Let's see. There we go. This is what I put in my, like my Instagram bio. So I am a textile product designer, entrepreneur, and author now. I'm also a mother, dreamer, doodler, optimist, connector, like a bunch of other things in addition to that. So I just wanted to start this talk by giving a little bit of my history, like my childhood, and then talk about some of the work that I've done related to design, but then also design education, really thinking about the future, like innovators and thinkers, which are children, in my opinion. So speaking of children, I grew up in Northern Virginia in a suburb outside of DC. I went to public school. My parents really encouraged me to try everything. I was pretty good at a few things like soccer and gymnastics, not so good at things that involved musical instruments. I really loved creative things. I learned how to sew maybe in second grade and kind of, always went back to that. Like high school would make things out of old clothing. And I think art class was always my favorite, but it wasn't something that my family thought that I could do for college or a profession. So This is me headed to Boston for college. I ended up, really basing my search on a school in a city and a school that I could play Division I soccer at. So Northeastern is where I landed. I was undecided for the first couple semesters and then ended up switching to architecture towards the end of my first year after taking a few electives. Um, so the photo of me in the middle is actually not me in study abroad, but it's representative of my time. I was studying in Florence, my third year in school, and I was able to also work a co-op job in Madrid one summer. And I think those experiences in Europe really had a lasting impact on me. The school in Florence it was called Saatchi. I think they still exist. But the instructor that I had an independent study with and an interior design class ended up taking our class to Salone that year. And that for me was so eye-opening to the big wide world of design. I think I came back from there and immediately was like, I need to get back to Europe. So I ended up going to Madrid the next summer. The photo on the right, that's me in my very first home studio. So that's where I started sewing my little production line of bags and home goods out of my apartment. Um, that was kind of after graduation. But I did work in architecture for a little while. When I first graduated, I worked at Machado and Silvetti here in Boston. Actually, all of this is here in Boston. I did some time at UTL, and I also worked at Over Under. The architecture projects were really arts-focused museums like Provincetown, and also Shady Hill School in Cambridge. And then I did kind of gain some experience in graphic design and signage wayfinding with some of those projects. So on the side, though, I was doing other projects. I just dug up some of these photos, and I'd say photography and iPhone photography has come a long way since these, but but I'm calling some of these projects curatorial community projects. So one of them was a magazine that my friends and I decided to start. We really couldn't afford printing, so we were like, let's do it on a CD-ROM because that's the future of magazines. We had a launch party at a bar in Brooklyn. We designed all the packaging, and the whole concept was to solicit submissions from photographers, writers, artists, designers around a particular subject. So the first one was industrial landscape, and then the second issue was amusement. And that's what you see, a little screen cap my friend saved. We only made it 2 issues, but I think that led into another project, which another friend of mine started maybe the following year. So I guess kind of around the same time, I had started making things on the side. I was working in architecture, but things were slow, which was a little bit unusual. Like when I first started, there were a lot of competitions and working late nights and on the weekends. But I was able to start experimenting with materials and started kind of a side project. But I had shown some of my stuff at, I don't know if this exists, but there's a young designers market in New York on Mulberry Street. Anyone remembers. So my friend and I decided we were going to replicate that model and start something in Boston. So we did a trial run. We worked with a developer, and we had a space on Arch Street, right across from Macy's in downtown Crossing, because we thought that was the shopping district at the time. Anyways, after five trial dates, we decided this is not a sustainable model. We were doing things that we felt were important to us as designers and how to treat the vendors. So we were providing all of the furniture and putting balloons out and baking cupcakes for the vendors, providing snacks, which was just out of the goodness of our heart. So that only lasted for 5 dates, but the following year we started another series called Design Nearby. And I think those were really focused on highlighting local talent. This specifically was related to print design, so print on t-shirts, print on paper, print on other objects. We would do a one-night show and sale at a local gallery, and we did this for about 4 years, just like one night in December. These are some of the flyers. So cloth, paper, scissors, ladies only, big print, little print, and then I think the last one was Command P. So all the while, like during all of these projects, I had started my first company, which was called Etc. Media, and then eventually morphed to Etc. Goods. It's a mouthful, but so I had started making bags out of this wool felt material that I was sourcing from Germany. And I had come across the felt or a similar, like an industrial felt, when I was a student. And our student in student in Florence, our teacher took us to Milan, to Salone one year. And I had seen this thick industrial felt. So I sent around a lot of requests to mills for samples, and there was just this one mill in Germany that I found that had started selling what they were calling design felt. So I was still working at Machado and Silvetti. I collected $50 from like maybe 10 of my coworkers and told them I would make them bags. And I let them choose the lining materials, and that's how that business was born. So I think that ultimately led me to start Phil's Felt, that relationship with the mill. They eventually were like, would you like to sell the felt in North America for us? And at the time, for like a year or two, I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. I just want to make these bags and sell them. But it was really hard to source them. Like every time I had to go to the bank to wire money and then like go get have a customs broker. And anyways, it turned out I've eventually met Tracy Roloff, who became my business partner. And we met through an Etsy transaction. She purchased a t-shirt from my Etsy shop at the time. But I knew that she had good taste because she had a design blog. And we eventually like met for coffee and started a business together. At first, we were selling just the felt by the yard. Like we were even cutting small squares, like 12 by 12s and 18 by 18 squares, and cutting them all ourselves, shipping them, packaging them, doing everything ourselves. And then we had an interior designer see our work and reach out, and I think they asked like, oh, can you make these panels? And we were like, I don't know, we'll find out. So it turned out our mill had a CNC machine. So we received this one order, maybe our second year in, which is the one over there. The Wiley Theater in Dallas, and that was like a third of our sales that year. So I think that really changed the trajectory of the business. And we're like, oh, we need to think bigger. So that was a really big turning point for us. And then 3 years into into Phil's Felt is when we were approached by Knoll. So we were acquired by Knoll about like 3 years in, and they put us with Spinnyback, which is a leather company that they already owned. And Tracy became the VP of marketing, and I became the VP of design for both Spinnyback and Phil's Felt. And part of the role, part of our work there was also rebranding Spinnyback. So that's kind of the image on the bottom right. We were able to incorporate our products into the Knoll showrooms, and we started working with cork and leather in addition to the felt, really focused on architectural products for interiors. I'll share a little bit more about, I have a lot of other Phil's Felt work I can share, but after, just like quickly get through this timeline, after Phil's Felt, after the acquisition, I stayed on for 5 years, and I decided to leave to start my own design studio. So I really wanted to focus on sustainable natural materials for interior design. I also consulted for some companies and helped with like acoustic products and architectural products. And around that same time, I started brainstorming this other concept, which really address the needs of my own family, the community, and I had young kids at the time. They're a little bit older now, but I opened Minni, which is a art and design education space in Boston. We now have 2 locations, and we also partner with schools. I'll talk more about Minni in a little bit. Yes, so take a sip of tea. One second. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my design work. I could like show loads and loads of inspiration images and lots of other work, but you can find a lot of that on my website or Instagram. So I really do want to talk about the things that matter to me and that relate to this lecture series. So for me, designing with purpose is really about the humans that will use the product, and also thinking about the materials and sustainability and the future. So when I say we think about sustainability in a number of ways. I really start with the materials, but I also consider durability really, really important in how that product or thing holds up over time. Um, so I like to show this sometimes when I'm meeting a new client to just talk about my process. This is like a prototype versus finished product. So the one on the left is when my daughter was very little. I decided we need to do this like magnetic backed felt, which was applied to a magnetic primed wall. The The installation on the right is what the product ended up being, and the differences between those 2 things, it's pretty subtle when you look at it, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about working with a natural material, like the changes with humidity and temperature. So sometimes there would be gaps in the tiles, the magnetic tiles. And sometimes if it was really humid, I think we would call it almost like a suture. They would like push up against each other. Also, putting removable tiles in a children's bedroom is like not a good idea. I would just find those triangles everywhere, sometimes like in random bags and kind of all over the place. At one point, we'd like removed the bottom like 3 feet so they couldn't reach them. She eventually shared a room with her brother. So the product on the right is what we ended up eventually launching, and I think has informed future collections and products for Phil's Felt, but it is felt adhered to an acoustic substrate that is more stable than the magnet. And it's also there's applied permanently with an adhesive. So I think like just looking at that and then thinking about the production and the installation time, like the same size on the left for it's like 4 squares is about a foot, is just 1 on the right. So just thinking about like an installer having to do 3 or 4 in the same time, they could do 1. So anyways, I like to just share that because it does, and it's like sitting with a product over time and learning from it is important to me. So most of the work that I do is focused on natural and recycled materials. I also try to design with intention and make sure that these materials are providing the right function for the people who will use them. While I am an independent designer, I'm not actually producing a lot of anything at this point. I'm designing products and other companies are producing them, and I'm working mostly in collaboration with these companies. So one example, like this collection of hanging panels for Phil's Felt, was really focused on the experience of the user. So thinking about privacy and more opaqueness below, and more letting more light and visuals through above at standing height. And then just also thinking about what happens when the panels overlap and what that looks like. A lot of the projects that I've done since leaving Phil's Felt are using up some of the remnant materials. So if we go back to those panels, like often people would specify a 4-foot wide panel, even though the width of the roll is 70 inches. So what happens to those extra strips? And I know Phil's Felt, if anybody's interested, does remnant sales. Like there's on their website, there's lots of these long pieces of remnants that are marked down. So this project was a collection, just a limited edition made from offcuts and then stitched together. It's just like pretty simple striped rugs. Another project I did was this installation at Wanted Design in Brooklyn. And I worked with one of Phil's Felt's partner manufacturers that had lots of like 1-inch strips left over. I worked with a company called Corral out of California using leftover material from the wine stopper, like wine cork. So when it's cut out of the bark, there's all these holes. And then what happens to the rest of it it gets ground up. And then these were kind of molded into new products. So there's a storage bin and then a side table when they get stacked. For this Phil's Felt project, these are some of my sketches, but similar to the triangle wall I showed before, it's an acoustic wall tile product, but previously there was just like one color per tile. And with this, working with Artaic, which is a Boston-based mosaic tile company, like they do little, really small mosaic tiles, we came up with a solution to make larger, they are small tiles, but when they're installed, you can have multiple colors within a panel or within a tile. These are showing repeating patterns, but it's possible with their system to come up with like a non-repeating pattern. It's really cool. Like many, many colors. I worked on a collection for HBF Textiles. It launched in May 2020, which was not the best time to introduce a new collection, but super colorful. And these are all made primarily from post-consumer recycled content and also made at mills in North America. And then this last collection, which Denise mentioned, recently won a Best of Year award, is called the Spool Collection for RBW. And this is probably one of the longest projects that I've worked on. It took 5.5 years from the initial meeting to when the product actually launched. And I think what I'm really proud of, and I will acknowledge, is that I'm not a lighting designer. But I think having the expertise in textiles and acoustic materials, I was able to kind of connect this lighting company to the acoustic consultants and some of the manufacturers that I knew, and that could help them kind of come up with the best possible solution. This really is about absorbing sound in some high traffic. I think some initially was designed for office, and then now it can be more hospitality. We're thinking like school cafeterias. So the other great piece of that is the standard textile option on these is one of my HBF textile patterns. So it's kind of like a double. And then one of my longstanding clients is a throw blanket manufacturer out of New York, and they make knit throw blankets out of recycled material that comes from the garment industry offcuts. It's made into new yarns and then knit into throws. So I have been working on creative direction for this company for about 1.5 years. They existed for many years before that. I've been doing some stuff with the previous owner, but there's now a new owner, and we're working on some new ideas for hospitality. So that's been pretty exciting. Okay, pause. So I do want to talk about the book that I worked on. This was a pandemic project. I was asked to co-author an interior design reference book. I feel like this is an opportunity to provide information, almost a guidebook. Sorry, there it is. Guidebook for students and also practicing interior designers. So it's organized, it's like a textbook. It's organized alphabetically by principal, and there are 100 of them. And I do get the question, like, how did you decide which principles? And we surveyed a bunch of practicing designers, furniture designers, interior designers, and architects to like almost place them, like what is important right now. I think some of them do relate to each other. So I'm just going to go through some of the spreads, but we don't need to get too much into them. I hope it's at the library upstairs, also on Amazon. Uh, but so just a few of the spreads. And I did want to point out, like in the See Also section, a lot of the principles will relate to other principles. So, and then we provide references and resources kind of throughout. So here's just a few other ones. Color theory, social impact. I'm really excited now we have a French edition, a Spanish edition, and last week or a few weeks ago, I received the Chinese edition, and this adorable like pocket size 5-inch by 5-inch edition. So that one is more reduced in content. So that was really challenging actually to kind of condense that much information into a pocket size book, but we did it. All right, so I'm going to talk next about Minni and why why it was important for me to start this business. So Minni is a community creative space that I opened in the South End about 7 years ago, almost 7 years in May will be our official birthday. We opened a second location in Beacon Hill about 3 years ago. So we offer art and design programming to children, the focus on early education. We start at 18 months and go up to age 10, although we have added some programming on either side of that. So like a sensory art club for babies and also a tween workshop series for some of our older students. We do weekly classes, weekend workshops, we have vacation programs in the summer program, and we also have parties, like we host birthday parties in the space. So that's our Beacon Hill location on Charles Street. It's in the vestibule next to Tate. I'm pointing at my screen, but it's over there. So a lot of people ask me like, why or how did you come up with this concept? And I think there are some selfish reasons in that, like I am a designer, but I'm also a mother and my kids were young and I was looking for options for them. And I saw that there was a need for this in our community, but there has been a huge decline in funding for arts education in schools, particularly in public schools. In cities, there's definitely a lack of creative spaces like this. We do have great museums, but sometimes there's like a barrier to entry for people to go there. And then personally for me, like there's not really design education for children. You may get some in high school. People have to choose it as a career path or something to study in college. So, which I wanted to mention earlier when I was, there's just like photos of kids in our spaces coming up. But when I was in 3rd grade, somebody asked, or it was a teacher, asked us to write like an essay. It was like a 1-pager, like, where do you see yourself in 2020? And my answer was, I was living in New York City. I was a lawyer and I was married to someone named Jerry. I did not have kids, but in my free time from being a lawyer, I like to babysit because I love children. So I think my mom saved that. And I honestly have no idea why I said lawyer. I think that I don't think children know what all of the options are. For me, I definitely wouldn't have been like, oh, I'm going to be a textile and product designer, entrepreneur, and author, like a mouthful, like I probably wouldn't have thought of any of those. Honestly, I didn't hear the term industrial design until I was 26. Like definitely out of college and, starting one of my first businesses, but I had no idea that I could have chosen a different area of design to study. It just wasn't, and I was, in a suburb of DC, but I just think my goal with Minni is to expose the children to all of these different areas of design. So that's graphic design, interior design, textiles, architecture, landscape, furniture design, and then also introduce them to working artists or what we do a lot. There's the kids in the orange mini shirts are on a field trip to one of the local galleries. So just exposing them to these other areas, I think especially seeing the artists in their studios is really valuable. And then taking them to galleries and hearing some of their observations, it's really fun. And then like I'm not sharing it here. I know Denise has seen it, but behind the scenes, my team, we're fairly small. I think we have a few close to full time, but like 15 very part time, or like 12 very part time, 15 total. But behind the scenes, we've built this system that is to organize all of our curriculum and lessons. It's also got our branding guidelines, training manuals, reference materials for our staff, so that if we do grow or move to other locations, it will be easy for somebody to take that on and refer to. I really believe having access to art and design education is important. We do work with local schools. We also offer community drop-ins and free programming throughout the year. For one of our programs, we did a series, and this is a school that has no art programming whatsoever, so we were asked to go during their school day. A lot of the programs, things we do now are after school, but for this one, we organized an end-of-year exhibition. I don't have a lot of photos, but it was all about shoe design, and there were different techniques that they had learned, like texture rubbings, blind contour, collaging. I mean, we're showing kind of a bunch of different techniques for representation. And I like to show this because it makes me feel good about all the feedback and good comments, good things that people have said and how meaningful it is to have Minni in their community. I think it's been really important to grow and evolve, like as the needs of our families and communities change, especially like during the pandemic. We did so many, hate the word, but using it, pivots to offer online programming, which was never my intention, and also offered like creative kits that we shipped in the mail with projects. A lot of that was, we're just making it up as we went, but kind of serving a need at the time. But anyways, like our studio when we first opened was set up very differently. The classes offering was very different. So it's definitely evolved and shifted over the years as people have let us know their feedback, and also, things have changed. Where we are in time, pretty good. So just to recap and try to answer some of the theme of this lecture in the best way that I can, like how do we design for the future? I don't think I have all the answers, but like this is what I'm doing or what I've done kind of in my own way. So design with purpose, for me, that's considering the end user, thinking about the human experience. Design responsibly. This is working with natural recycled materials, sustainability, and just, making a choice to work with brands and companies that support that mission. Design to educate, sharing knowledge with others. Whether that's in the form of a book or classes, maybe this lecture, I don't know. And then design for social impact. I think without realizing this started with some of my projects like the Suitcase magazine and the organizing the exhibition and the markets. And now it's really translated into making design education accessible for children through Minni's programming. And then design for good. For me, this is using design as a tool to create a better world, making those choices that benefit people, our communities, and the planet. So I just wanted to like point out to any of you who are like, I don't know what to do with my life. You don't have to choose one path. This quote from Tina Fey kind of sums it up for me. You can be all the things. Yeah. So that's it. This is my website, Instagram handles, and Minni's as well, if you'd like to follow along. Questions? I don't know. Okay,
Thank you for that.
sure.
It was great to have something tactile. The colors are beautiful. Happy to see that you're recycling things. But I always want to know, when I see something like this, what is your next ideal project or problem to solve? What would you like to be working on next? You've come this far, all these different directions, like Tina Fey would ask, maybe. What's the next direction? What would you like to be working on now?
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure. I have about 20 ideas. But I have been saying I would love to connect the things that I'm designing with the children's focus. So products for educational spaces, or that could be incorporated into educational or like hospitals even. Um, I do, you know, with Minni, I have big goals to increase our school partnerships. It's a challenge being in Boston with high rents and payroll costs. It looks really great on, you know, on through the website and stuff, but some days are really hard. You know, we've had like this week I had 2 people out sick, and you know, it's a scramble to like get people to fill in. It's just a constant. So I think for me, I'm doing a lot of the operations and less of the creative on a day-to-day basis, and I think I would definitely love to push more into the creative, but I love these projects too. So thanks for asking. I don't know all the answers.
I have 2 questions from Zoomland. Anthony Lowe asks, are you planning on expanding or solving a new problem through product development? That's the first question.
I would love to. um, we shall see. Like I do think there's a lot of interesting work around biomaterials that it's still very new. So I don't know that all of the testing has been in place, but I do think, you know, looking more to more renewable resources and products is something, especially in textiles, but other products as well. It'd be really interesting to explore. And then again, like connecting work with children and education to design would be wonderful.
Great. Erin Hull asks, after stating your work is wonderful,
Mhm.
when you were starting out, were you afraid of anything and how did you address it? That's the first question.
Apparently not. I don't know. I think I've always bounced ideas off of friends and family. And I do think when I made the decision to leave the cushy position at Knoll after 5 years. And I know my parents especially were like, are you sure you want to like lose that stability? And I do think I had gotten to a point where on a daily basis, I was just not feeling happy about the work I was doing. I'm happy that I'm collaborating with the company still, and we've got a good relationship. But I do think sometimes it's great to bounce ideas off of people, but don't always listen to everyone.
Great. And then the second question from Erin, once the business progressed, how do you have time to balance everything and maintain quality, creativity, and take
Haha.
care of yourself?
There's no such thing as work-life balance. That's my answer. It's really, really challenging. I think I would find myself when my kids were younger, like working from the playground, you know, but I do like to be present like try to cut it off when I'm with my family versus, and then same thing with work. But there's definitely times when it's all happening all at once and there are no boundaries. So I don't have a great answer for that.
All right. And the last question I'm going to give you from Zoomland before we'll turn it back to the room. Giovanna wants to know how you go from an idea to the actual product.
It's a process. And I think for me, it's been working with other companies. Sometimes they provide a design brief that is to solve a problem or a challenge that they might have. Other times it's me sometimes coming up with an idea and taking it to a company. But I do think as I was looking at all of this and also like, I got some feedback from my friend and my Phil's Felt co-founder earlier this week about this lecture, like what do you see? What is the red thread in all of this? And I think her feedback, I don't know if I'm answering the question at all, was just that I find there's like a void or a lack of something, and I'm trying to fill that. So whether that's starting a new business or just inserting a new product into the marketplace, like that's kind of the driver in some of those projects. Are we good? Oh, one more.
Is all very inspiring. You know, I'm a big fan, as well as a neighbor. But sometimes I think it's helpful. Like we've seen all this great work, and it's truly amazing. But sometimes I feel like you also learn from projects that go bad. So I was wondering if you could talk about, because you learn from them, right? You learn what you like and what not to do in the future. So I was wondering if you could talk about one of those projects.
Well, I think like I could use my first business as an example. It did ultimately lead to Phil's Felt starting, but I sunk some money into it. Yes, I collected money from coworkers, but I was spending most of my days trying to figure out how to start a business. I think there were things that I overthought and, provided sample cards for bag design, like, and put them in the mail. Um, but I was doing these trade shows, like wholesale trade shows where shop buyers come and place orders. And it was really expensive to do the trade shows. You needed to make enough orders. And ultimately, I just racked up a lot of debt. I did learn a lot, but at the end of it, like, it just wasn't a sustainable business. And I kind of had to like let it go. Luckily, at the same time, we were starting Phil's Felt and I had a business partner. So I think that really helped, but it was sad to kind of let that go. The magazine project was certainly like, this is going to be great. And then, nobody had time for it after 2 issues. There was no funding or no money. I think, sometimes sometimes you put products out there. Like I have been asked by manufacturers to work on a design brief together. I would submit the ideas. We go back and forth. It kind of, for me, it is a collaboration. So when they ask for something that needs to be like fit to this size and scale, sometimes my initial concept morphed so much that it became something else. And then like ultimately some of those ideas they never launched them. So technically they give the designs back to you, but a lot of times like I'm like, well, if they didn't use it, I'm not going to really show it to anyone else. So there's a lot of stuff like that I'm not showing. But I do think I've learned from that. And yeah, I mean, I think like all of it I see as a learning, a way to learn. Even like Minni, it's very tight month to month. But in the last 2 years, we developed this curriculum system that like, I spent more, we spent more on employees putting that together. But we have it, it's working. So it was worth it, even though we probably lost money because of that time spent. So I'm an optimist, so I'm like, it's a learning opportunity. But yeah, there's definitely been failures to learn from.
Hey Kelly, I'm Matt. I'm from Milwaukee. I'm also a product designer. Actually, I was in Milan the spring after Fizz Felt sold to Knoll. So I
Oh,
actually got to show at Salone and see that, like your samples. So that's pretty cool. My question is, as a product designer, how do you balance in an architectural work the architect's needs or the interior designer's needs and the end user's needs, since they are two separate people with different perspectives?
that's a great question. I think a lot of the times, um, yeah, that's a challenge, but I guess it depends on the type of product and kind of like the marketing and training material side of it is really, and the like educational piece of it is really important. I had a I had a products come out recently and they only paid for one rendering, and like I just I just was like, oh, that's just such a lack. Like, how are we going to sell this product with one rendering? Like, what else can I do? So I think, I mean, sometimes you have to market it yourself. Other companies I've worked with don't have the budget for photography, but I want photography in a certain way, like having a human element, not really myself, but these are those 1-inch strips from that felt project, by the way. Um, Sorry, I'm pointing at the screen and you can't see in Milwaukee. But yeah, so I think sometimes going above and beyond, like you're taking it and kind of telling your own story with it. I don't know if that answered the question, but I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, I've, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Without tilting it down more. Um, so a couple questions. One is, like intellectual property or trademarking. Like ideas are a little hard, but when you started out, before you were part of a company and you were just doing your own thing, how did you go about making sure that someone wasn't stealing your idea and then mass producing it?
I didn't do very much around that. I think as once we were working under Knoll, there were definitely products that were, we did do more research and had like patent pending. It's such a longer process. I do think, especially with furniture design, like if you change the design by an inch, or I don't know, there's so many like little changes. But I kind of put that on to the manufacturer, and it's kind of less of my role in the product. And I do think there are so many things out there that look the same, and it is hard. Like I had designed this wine rack out of felt, and even the company, I was working with a different mill out of Canada, and I had them die cutting the shape of the wine rack for me and just shipping those, and then I would stitch them together and package them. And like maybe a year later, I saw they were selling it on their website. Like they were making their own version of it. And it just like really upset me. But I also was like, how many people are actually shopping on this like felt manufacturer's website? And like how much am I selling for it to be worth this fight? I did send a letter and they maybe took it down for a little while, but at the end of the day, like I had to kind of let that go.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I've seen like some of like IKEA sold these panels and I was like, oh, maybe that was one of your accounts, but then,
No.
um, the other question was, oh, when you started out, you said you worked at Machado Silvetti, right? So,
Mhm.
but money wise, like, did you have any other side gigs when you were doing your companies, or did you just take money from your other jobs to
I just
fund it?
yeah.
And that's what, yeah,
Yeah, I just took money
small
from
business loans or
yeah. No loans. It really was. I was telling Fritz earlier, I worked at Machado and Silvetti for a time and then I quit to start my own business. And 2 months later, I was broke and needed a job. So people from UTIL had worked and they had started UTIL. So I ended up working there 20 hours a week, and that worked for them because they were starting out, and that worked for me because it gave me time to work on my new business. I do think I will say there was an order from the Art Institute of Chicago for their holiday catalog one year that was pretty huge. And that was the money from that, rather than paying down debt, the money from that 5,000, like 5,000 of it went into starting Phil's Felt. So Tracy and I each put in $5,000 to get our first felt shipment. The rest of the time we were working part-time jobs. Even up to the acquisition, like we were both working elsewhere. Like we were not paying ourselves very much. So it was great. Like I found out I was pregnant, like right around the same time I found out they wanted to acquire us, and I was like, wow, I never thought I would get maternity leave. This is crazy. But but yeah, so
Thank you so much, Kelly, for this wonderful talk. And I kind of have a follow-up question, as the previous question. Could you please also speak a little bit to the astronaut aspect of your, the title? Is that nature or nurture? If you always known you would like to have your own business, because speaking of myself as a trained textile designer, I would never connect textile design with having my business as a young undergrad. So could you please speak a little?
I honestly, I could not have predicted any of it. I think like one thing kind of led to another to another. I think, the timing of felt was just like hit at the right time. Also with acoustic materials in the open workplace at that time. But no, I thought, when I went to college initially, I wanted to do international affairs because it sounded like I would get to travel a lot, which I still love to travel a lot. But I took like one course in that, and then other electives that were like architecture or 3D art related, and I was like, that kind of was like, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. It was a lot of policy I didn't understand, but I do think, I went undecided. I think all of my experiences have sort of like shaped who I have become and kind of shaped my career path. And honestly, I don't know what I'll be doing in 20 years from now because it's probably going to be a lot different. I don't know. Could be the same.